And I'm
Awesome.
unlocking the waiting room now.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to start at the top of the hour. My name is Maggie Schuster from UAS Plus Services. And this is our 17th workshop, virtual workshop. So really excited about today's presenter. So hang in there. We're going to start on the top of the hour as I speak. So we got about 3 minutes, 2-3 minutes. So hang in there. Appreciate everyone's attendance today. It's going to be super exciting. There's so much to cover today, so I'm really stoked. And keep in mind that, we are recording these, so you guys can go back and see all the way up to workshop 1 on our northtexasuas.com. They have all the recordings there, all different titles, whether it be preparing for your 107 or education, drone sports, lots of good subjects. And we update it. Just want to also remind everyone that has joined us today, you are being recorded. And if you have any questions, feel free to enter your question in the chat, and I'll pick them up and ask the questions. Sometimes our presenters will go ahead and answer the question inside the chat itself. And just want to remind all the presenters today to go ahead and put your information in the chat, so that if anyone wants to contact you, they can do so. Thanks, I appreciate it. Okay, we have 1 more minute and we'll get started. Again, we're going to start exactly at 10. So thank you again for joining us. Really excited. We got about 55 people that have registered. So we are really looking forward to today. So appreciate that. One more minute and we'll get started. Okay, well, it is 10 o'clock and I want to welcome everyone again here to the Know Before You Fly Your Drone Workshop. Yay, it's number 17. I can't believe it. I'm so excited. We've got some really exciting presenters today, but just to remind everyone, this is the first initiative for the North Central Texas Council of Governments. We put this together, Ernest Huffman, who's here today, put this together almost 3 years ago. And it was the first initiative for education. We really wanted to reach out not only to our recreational flyers, but just the industry itself and the general public. And it's about not only safe practices, but it's networking and the resources that are out there. So this is why we started in the very beginning. So I'm really excited. I want to get started right away with Sean Duff and Carl Schwab with Skyline Drones. They've been in the business for a while now, and their specialty is really high tech, like LiDAR and mapping and things like that, but really getting into the nitty gritties of the industry. So let's go ahead and start. Sean, do you want to introduce yourself? And then Carl, just give us a little background of how you got involved. What got you started into the drone industry?
Yes. So Carl and I, we go a ways back. We actually grew up together here in Houston, Texas. We played high school football, played in the Astrodome together in the playoffs, all kind of neat things. And we recently, in the last 5 to 6 years, we got back together and got into drones. So pretty exciting stuff. We started out with basic pictures and quickly learned that there's a lot more to this business and a lot more opportunity than just taking pictures and doing real estate shots. And we've developed into really working a lot critical infrastructure and with a lot of situations that most people probably don't get a chance to work in. And it's been pretty exciting. And I think what I'd like to do is let Carl do just a brief introduction, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about myself, as well as let Carl introduce himself.
That sounds
Carl,
great.
Yeah,
Carl, go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. So my name's Carl Schwab. I got into drones not happily. Quite honestly, I was really upset. I was flying mapping airplanes in Colorado, and we're based out of Texas with special camera systems that would fit in the belly of the airplane. And man, I was loving it because I got the right software and I got to fly airplanes. And and my boss says, we're moving to drones. And I thought, who the hell wants to be on, fly a drone? I really didn't. I almost quit. It was a true story. I almost quit. I deliberated very heavily. Man, I'm glad I didn't, because man, I love flying drones. And, we always say, Maggie, it's always better to be down here wishing you were up there than to be up there wishing you were down here. So
I've never heard of that one. That's really
as
good.
a pilot,
Really good, Carl. Yeah.
Anyway, guys, so let's just give Maggie, if you're ready, I'll go ahead and kick into, we have kind of a lot of slides to cover.
Sure, let's go ahead.
Okay, so everybody, this presentation is mainly just to kind of get you, going from zero and what it takes to go from zero and to be busy flying your unmanned aircraft. So let's kind of look at it. I want to introduce Sean. Sean's our Chief Executive Officer. He's sort of semi either famous or nefarious. He was spotted. He was working with the president of USAA back during Harvey, and we were filming the president, his mom's house here in Houston, and Bloomberg caught up with Sean and did some photo ops with him. So with that, Sean, I'm gonna let you go ahead and introduce kind of like your background and your history. It's kind of like has nothing to do really with drones. So go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, very good. We'll breeze through this and make it real short. So my background, I'm a graduate of the University of Houston here in Texas, of course. I started working in engineering with Hawker Siddeley Power Engineering early on and did a couple years there. I moved in from there. I was a real fitness nut at the time. I got into a company called Multisports, and we did, we would manufacture around the world and bring products into the United States. I really honed my sales skills in that job. And then finally, I found a home in insurance and risk management. And I did that for probably 15, 16, 17 years straight. And got real familiar with working with businesses, with understanding risk management, which has played a critical role in us now with from a business perspective when we're on a job site. That I never knew that would come back to being a useful thing when we got into the drone world, but it is. And then finally, Carl and we teamed up in 2016, right around when the first hurricane, everybody remembers, really came through and devastated the area. We did a lot of work capturing those moments, working with the insurance companies to begin with. And ever since then, we've just grown to places that we never expected to be. So with that said, that's kind of my background really quick. From there, let me introduce Carl actually. And so Carl is really, Carl's very gifted. He's a software engineer, but he's also a pilot. He's been flying for almost 25, 30 years, Carl, that you've been in the air. So you've got a ton of experience. He knows camera systems. He's really the key to the technical part, and he can answer a ton of questions if you want to dig into this stuff at some point, if anybody has questions about that. But Carl's a Marine. He's a good friend of mine. I've known him for a number of years. Great guy. And with that, Carl, other than every once in a while, he takes me to a buffet and makes me eat too much. But other than that, he's a great guy. So with that, Carl, go ahead and introduce yourself real quick.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Well, let me go back through my history. I went to Texas A&M, and after school, I went to work for a company called Raytheon Missile Systems Division. They were up in Massachusetts, and a very interesting company. I worked on a Patriot missile system, and also worked for a company called United Defense on a Crusader self-propelled howitzer. And that was actually, I'm from Massachusetts to Minnesota. My wife at the time, she was really upset. She said, "Hey, I want to go somewhere warmer." And guess who called down in Tucson? Was also Raytheon again. And my buddy, who I worked with, became the engineering manager for 800 software engineers. He goes, "Man, I can give you whatever salary you want." I'm like, okay. So, man, I'll tell you what, I made more working at Raytheon than I make now. I made really good money there, but worked, as a software engineer on the Standard Missile 2. We had a dome that sat on the side of the missile. And so when the missile launches, a bunch of pyrotechnics fire and it launches the dome cover. And then we start shooting out and computing mass flow rate for the argon gas coming over the dome. It was pretty cool. This was to actually in today's times, this is one of the last resorts for a nuclear warhead coming to us. And I was in a lot of classified briefings for this missile. And It's shot in 2 missile salvos, but it's your last chance, really more to protect the ships. And you see it launching from a vertical launching system. I also worked on a program with another program with the United Defense called the Mark 45. It's a 5-inch gun. It was pretty cool. I did all of the fiber optics going from the gun to the bridge. So I did all the software that made the drivers work for that back. It's kind of old time software stuff. Then I also worked on this Marine Corps. Basically, it was the Marine Corps amphibious assault vehicle. It used to be called the AAAV, but then it changed its name to the Expeditionary Fighting Vehicle. It got canceled and was too bad because this was a pretty cool gun, although the gun is used on Navy ships today in other environments. So that's kind of a cool project. And we did all of the software for this gun. And believe it or not, the gun was much like your camera gimbal on a drone. And back then, I mean, this was a 1 kilohertz loop that we were running for control of this gun. So as the ship bounced in the water, the gun had to stay steady on a target. So it's just exactly the same kind of algorithms. And back then, that was state of the art, right? 2006, 2007, 2008. That was really, really state of the art technology. I transitioned, worked on another military program. You see a lot of military here, and that's because of my background in the Marines. Worked on a joint tactical radio system, later called the HMS, the handheld manpack small form factor. That was in Scottsdale, Arizona. That was a great program, a very highly encrypted radio. Had a chip called the AIM chip, the automatic information, automatic information infosec chip. Anyway, it had the coolest thing about that chip was a small chip. If you tried to tamper with it, it would self-release acid and dissolve. It was very, very classified program. Very cool. Now, in about 2013, I transitioned to Houston, and there's not a lot of military programs here. I started working with Lufkin, who was bought out by GE Automation. So I ended up working with Lufkin for a couple of years, learning, pump off controllers. And again, this is writing software to control the artificial lifts that go downhole. It was a really good introduction because we do a lot of stuff now with oil companies. Obviously in this area, this neck of the woods, it was a great introduction to me. I got to go out and do a lot of installs, check out customer sites, etc. I was out in Bakersfield, which is an amazing site to see. And then I started working when GE took over. I was really, really not happy with GE, to be honest with you. So I came into my executive and I told him, I said, I quit. He goes, well, how many weeks till you're gone? I said, today. I'm out. I can't handle it. GE, nothing against them, but they would sit around in a circle and they would never make a decision. You'd have 30 people debating for 2 hours on a simple decision. Nobody could make the decision. So I couldn't handle that corporate environment. Once GE bought Lufkin, I had to get out. And so I started working as a pilot for airplanes. And so we flew, Cessna Station Air, Cessna 300, 310s, twin engines, et cetera. And they had camera systems on the bottom. And not about a year into it, they said, hey, we're not going to fly airplanes anymore. And basically there was an accident that somebody was killed. And they just said, it's too expensive to do this. We're going to go to drones. And so what you see here is an early prototype of a 4-camera system we were working on for visual intelligence. Now, visual intelligence, I really owe a lot to Ted Miller. He's the owner and the founder of Visual Intelligence. He's also the co-founder of Crown Castle. Crown Castle is the second largest tower company in the nation. And so I got to work for this basically a billionaire directly as my boss for about 6 years. Really great guy, and learned a lot about everything in business and software, cameras, especially cameras. I worked with Joe McCoy, who is a fantastic, if you ever want to know somebody who knows the most about cameras and lenses, Joe McCoy, he taught me a lot of things. We had our own photogrammetrist, and just such a great group. And due to the drone industry taking off, I got involved also at roughly the same time doing instructing. So I worked with Dart Drones as a lead instructor up until this last December, and kind of said, you know what, we are too busy. I'm too busy. I can't continue to instruct. But this really led the foundation for my understanding of drones, the intricacy of it, and working with people to help them understand drones. So this was also, mostly on weekends. As it turned out, I ended up going full-time instructing pretty much this last year up until this last December. And it was amazing. But because of the work requirements, I mean, I had to tell Abby, I said, I've got to go. But a fantastic group there at DART. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Carl, just real quick.
Yep.
Was that you in the picture? Because we can't see your pretty face up here.
I'm the chubbo to the left. Yeah, that's me.
To the left. Okay, just so everyone knows,
I can put my picture
yeah,
on.
we would love to see you. It's always more engaging.
So nothing to hide. Let's see if it comes up. All right, so I got my
There
Bucky,
he is.
got my Bucky shirt on. You guys are from Texas, you know Bucky's.
Yeah, Bucky's is a landmark here in Texas.
Yeah. So this is Colin. Colin's a great guy. He was the chief instructor for DART. He now works with Skydio. He's doing a lot of work with them. Great guy. And then of course, the whole time that I was working with Ted, because I started doing the instructing, I had to have insurance, and technically I couldn't get insurance unless I had a company. So that's why I started. It's just Sean and I started Skyline Drones. It's kind of a joke, it really wasn't really meant to be a company that we were going to really try to build or anything. It was just something to kind of hold a place for insurance, and so I could do side work. In my instructing, I have been all over the world. I've been lucky. I got to go to Valdez, Alaska. I got to go to the glaciers there, trained in this case, their police and their city group, their fire department. That was a week-long training, an amazing place. I've trained 7 of the 12 Phillips 66 refineries across the U.S. And so this was in Billings, Montana. This was a fantastic, very cold October, about 8 degrees out. So, and you see a little M300 there. It was a fantastic time. Last summer, I got to go to Dubai for 35 days. So I was there training the police department and about 80 different police officers there in their local town. And then, of course, there's Joe. He's the other founder of Skyline. He's in the front. That's Joey. He and I, we do a lot of work here. This is a Houston fuel oil terminal company. And then again, I was up in Presque Isle, Maine, working with a Native American tribe, the Micmac tribe. Tell you what, we had 2 armed men coming down the road with assault rifles towards us. And it was one of the most scariest things I've ever seen. The chief here in the red shirt basically said, hey, you guys, there's somebody coming down here. They just passed them on the road. They asked them to leave. You're on reservation property. And the guy said, we'll stay if we want to stay. So we had to use this truck with all the lights, to make it look like we're police, and run the sirens. And we ran the drone up and we were able to chase those guys off. It was a really scary day, but we were lucky they left. But it was an interesting training environment. And probably most interesting, I got to train at the Pentagon. And even though that looks like a Saturday Night Live skit picture, that's actually the only place in the Pentagon you can take a picture, and it looks fake. But it was an interesting experience to train their group. I trained their Pentagon Force Protection Agency, so they have their own agency that's used to protect the Pentagon. And I've done a heck of a lot of training out in California with the likes of SoCal Edison. They've had an incredible program bringing up their pilots. And going from 0 to a full up drone program. So it's been quite an experience of training. At this point, are there any questions, I guess, from anybody? If not, we'll kind of go into what we want to talk about, which is, how do we go from nothing to 0 to the next level? And the first thing is, what kind of drone do I want to use? And it's always good to kind of take a look at some of these drones. It depends on what you want to do. We have film, photography, videography. That's a great thing to do. We have mapping and surveying. That's another thing that we can do. We can do infrastructure inspection. We can do construction. What is it you want to do? What are you trying to do? And a lot of times you may even get into, if you're a first responder, you may do emergency services. I work with the chief pilot for DPS here in the state of Texas. He's a great drone pilot. And they're using drones on accident scenes, and they have a very good drone program here in Texas. So there's all sorts of uses, and once you figure out your use for the drone, you can go to the next level. And just remember, there's in any market, there's always new uses for drones. new ways to use them, new things to do. So just remember, if you can think it, you can probably do it with the drone. The biggest thing in consideration you want to look at is, at the very beginning, I think is whether or not you're going to be looking at a multi-rotor or fixed wing drone. I think for most people getting into the industry, you need to stick to something simple and cheap. It's the best way to get in and get experience. When you get into the fixed wing platforms, yes, they have longer flight times, but they're more for the more advanced users, and for companies, they're also about 10 times more expensive than say your multi-rotor. So this little EB here is probably about $25,000-$30,000 back in the day, whereas this little Phantom has the same kind of camera, but even better camera probably than the EB. It was about $1,500. So you got to figure out what you want and what you're trying to do with the drone. And once you do that, you can look and you'll see there's going to be a very wide range of prices and sizes. And it depends. It depends on, how far you want to fly it, how much flight time, what kind of camera and gimbal. But the key difference that you're going to find really is going to be mostly based upon the sensor. And that's what we call your camera, or in the case, it could be also considered a thermal sensor, a RGB sensor, a LiDAR sensor, multispectral, etc. All of those would be considered your sensor. So based on that will dictate a lot of times your price range. From the prosumer level, you have everything from Phantoms to the Mavics to Autel, Evo. You have the Parrot, Anafi. You have the Skydio too. Lots of different drones. They range anywhere from 500, maybe in some cases up to 5,000 if you buy all the features and a bunch of spare batteries. But that's typically where you're at. From a professional level, you're looking at $3,000. Probably at a very for a minimal setup, all the way to well over 100K, right? Depending on what you're going to buy. And so you start getting into a lot more money very quickly with that professional side. Some of the leading brands, we have Parrot, Autel, DJI, and Skydio. Those are the main four that are out there. I'm not going to take anything away from other drone manufacturers. Please don't, think that I'm trying to pitch these to you. I'm just telling you these are probably the most common that are in the market today. And there may even be some newer ones from when I developed this slide. But for your knowledge, Parrot, they are kind of what they call a blue drone, more or less. I mean, I will tell you that SoCal Edison is using them, and they have literally during my training fallen out of the sky. I've had an Anafi thermal twice in one day. Basically, before lunch we had one fall out of the sky, and after lunch. I don't know what the problems are. I think they understand there's problems. It could have to do with the battery or the power distribution. But for me, I would stay away from Parrot if I'm buying a drone. Just stay away. Even though they're nice, they have the rotation going up 90 degrees. I would strongly caution you. I would say they're probably number 3 in the world, or even maybe number 4 now with Skydio and Autel making a huge dent in the market. So they're probably.
Yeah. And just to clarify for the people that are attending right now, blue drones mean specifically for security reasons. There are
Government use.
Just clarify that. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carl.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So I'm sorry I'm going so quickly. I've just got so many slides. I apologize.
No, all good. Great information.
Autel, these guys were founded in 2014. They're actually about 20 kilometers from DJI's main factory in China. So a lot of the engineers that worked at DJI actually came and worked at Autel and vice versa. So they're kind of like, it's kind of funny. We kind of laugh about it. But they have some fantastic drones. I would say Autel is going to be my next drone. I just am not happy with the remote control, the user interface, although it's supposed to have gotten a lot better. And I just haven't plunked down, some cash to do it. These drones can be kind of expensive. You can look at tying up, 3 to 10 grand, depending on what model you buy. But I have heard nothing but really wonderful things about the Autel drone. So I've flown them. One of the earlier versions, I liked the camera pictures, and I thought they were actually as good as the Mavic camera, the Hasselblad. I thought they rivaled the Hasselblad pretty much. It's just they don't have that third-party support that I use a lot with DJI.
Great thermal camera too. Is
wonderful. Yeah, wonderful radiometric thermal. Skydio, like I said before, one of my co-instructors, Colin, Romberger and I, we worked together for about 5 years well, he was there I think he was there 5 years, and 4 of the 5 that I was there. He left about a year and a half ago, and maybe it was about a year ago. And he went over to Skydio and has nothing but great things to say about Skydio. And in fact, my photogrammetrist that I work with, he has seen some pretty impressive data. And he says, even though it's a crappy camera on the Skydio 2, it is able to get so close to some of the objects that and because it has a collision avoidance, it takes away the need for that higher end camera. So it's really, he says he's seen some really interesting photogrammetric type of renditions, or let's call it reality models from the Skydio 2, and he's pretty happy.
I heard that the avoid and collision is really good on that, but they had some problems with them falling out of the sky too. Do you know if they've rectified that?
No, I'm not familiar firsthand with anything like, so the Skydio, I will tell you, I did put some money down for a purchase, and it was $900, and then when it came time to purchase it, to get it to where it really would be useful, it was another basically $2,000. It was like $2,800, and I was like, man, I can't let $2,800 go on something that I just don't know anything about. So
right. And what about supply and demand? I think that's Skydio, Autel. Like if you are like a police department, I know that there are some delays on
everything in the industry is got problems, right? COVID.
Yeah, so keep that in mind, everyone. If you are wanting to purchase something, know that there might be a delay in getting it. So, plan ahead.
Yeah. So Skydio, great company. I think you can't go wrong with Skydio, especially as a beginner. But just understand also, and they're getting some more, kind of internal apps to run with Skydio to do some cool stuff, to do some what we usually call the third-party apps in DJI. DJI has such a plethora of other companies who have built these third-party apps. I mean, you got UGCS, you've got Lychee, you've got Ground Station Pro, you've got all these little things that DJI's built, and tons of things, autopilot. You've got everybody and their dog can extend with DJI, and that's really not the case with a lot of these other drone companies we're showing you. So that's really what's pushed DJI to the top. They do have a good 60 to 70% of the market, and they're very reliable. I have had DJI aircraft fall out of the sky. I'm going to tell you, as a drone pilot, and I tell this as nicely as possible, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You will have a failure in flight. And this just is natural. You have vibrating parts. You've got, here, especially in Houston, especially if we're out in the oil field, we've got terrible H2S gas. We've got all this corrosiveness. It's going to eat away at your parts. It's going to eat away, the humidity, et cetera. So depending on your country and your operating conditions, your life of the aircraft is going to, be impacted. So if you have, like I do, a couple of Mavic 2s that are over 2 years old, I got 4 of them, and they're all over 2 years old. I expect every time I fly, I expect one of them to fall out of the sky. It's going to happen. Sean can tell you. Sean, you had a Phantom 4 come down on you, and you were really lucky because it kind of, it broke the landing gear, but basically it didn't break the camera, right?
Absolutely. I was lucky enough to be able to do a somewhat controlled flight when the propeller exploded, basically, and bring it down in a circle to land it, and very lucky. So I expected it to be done with, but yes, it does happen. And Carl, there's a question. Can you speak a little bit to the unique H520?
So the unique H520, actually, I have a unique H520. It's a fantastic aircraft. We're working on putting it through its paces, and I don't have anything necessarily negative to say about the unique 520 per se. It has a 20 megapixel camera, and the biggest issue right now is trying to find time to put it into my workflow. But it's a fantastic aircraft. And it does have the 6 propellers system, so it has some redundancy. But I don't have a lot of stick time on the aircraft at this point. I hope to have it very shortly.
Excellent.
Okay, so let's move on to the Mavic series, and I'm sorry for not including unique. My apologies. It should be included here as well. The Mavic series, the Mavic 2 has been my go-to aircraft, but as you can see, there are tons of options with the Mavic. Okay, just tons of options here. Okay, and even the Mavic Mini 2, I love. When I was in Dubai, I had a driver who would come and pick me up every day. He was a police officer, and I ended up giving him my Mavic Mini 2, and I kicked myself for doing it because, man, I had a nice case, and I just really love that little drone. It's fantastic. 4K video, had great flight time, almost 25 minutes, and you're not going to hurt anything with that little thing. It's amazing. You have all the way up to the $6,500 Enterprise Advanced, which has a thermal and it's basically a dual camera. So you have different ranges. The newest is the Mavic 3. So you have lots of options here. And I strongly recommend any new drone pilot have one or the other types of Mavics. You're gonna have to figure out what works best for your use case. Now for the Mavics, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I kind of took this slide from Dart Drones just to kind of show you, this is what we kind of show, but it's very useful. We have a half a pound at the smaller end for the Mavic. And as you can see, I mean, these things go 30 minutes, 34 minutes. I'd say that's kind of a best case scenario. I wouldn't say that's really what I would brag about. I'd say, subtract 5 minutes from those times, and it's probably realistic. They have great operating temperatures, great camera resolution. And then as we go up to the 2-pound version for the 2 Pro and the 2 Zoom, I mean, we're at 2 pounds. And we have an incredibly good camera resolution, just a fantastic drone. And it goes very, very fast, even for its small speed, right? So it's a very practical drone in almost all of the weather conditions you would want to fly in. And then here's some more. So all are hovering around 2 pounds, all very similar, and a fantastic family of drones to choose from. The Phantom series, we have the version 2. Highly suggest that you own a Phantom if you can get your hands on one. It's a perfect practice drone. This drone allows you to put the drone in the aircraft into what's called an ATTI mode or attitude mode, where basically the GPS is shut off and it forces you to know how to fly in windy conditions. So you can just, with the mode switch, you flick the mode switch on the remote control and it puts you right into that ATTI mode. Now you also have the Phantom 4 RTK, which is a more expensive aircraft. It's about I'm going to say on the order of probably about I want to say about $5,000 to $6,000. But its precision in the geotagging of images is just fantastic. Down to 2 to 4 centimeters. You do have to run with a base station, but it's a fantastic aircraft. And then you see this multispectral. It's also probably $6 or $7 grand as well. So a fantastic family as well. I would say for my practice drone, I would want to have a Phantom. I have about 3 or 4 of them still, and you never know when you're going to need them. So fantastic aircraft. The aircraft's a little bigger than the Mavic, but it has about the same longevity in the air, 30 or so minutes. And I will say, going back to the Mavic, there was not a slide for the Mavic 3, but it did have a flight time of in the 40 to 45 minute range. So just keep that in mind. So that new Mavic 3 is really a big step up. But for the Phantom and most of the Mavics, you're stuck down at the 28, 25 minute mark. But the big difference between the Phantom version 2 is it has a 20 megapixel sensor that it has a mechanical shutter. And so for mapping, it works better. And it also has an f-stop, so it has a mechanical aperture. Most of your Mavics, well, a lot of your Mavics don't have the mechanical aperture. The higher end Mavics do, but they're still a rolling shutter. And so from a mapping perspective, I always tell people, when I was in Dubai, we had not one day with clouds for 35 days. So I told them, I said, you have no problems probably running with your Mavics because your shutter speed is fast enough. So from that perspective, if you have good light, mapping with the Mavic is possible. It's still, you still have that rolling shutter to worry about. But in low light, the Mavic just really isn't going to cut the cheese for the mapping. Okay. And then last, at the end of the day, when you're starting to get into higher end prosumers, we have the Inspire 2, a fantastic aircraft. We've heard rumors that there might be an Inspire 3, who knows? But this aircraft is really fantastic. The only drawback here is, man, the Inspire 1, the Inspire 2, both these aircraft are extremely fast. I mean, almost, in the 50 to 60 mile per hour range, just very fast. And look, you're at 9 pounds. Now, my goal when I'm on a job is my goal is not to hurt anybody. I don't want to kill someone, right? So, now at 9 pounds, this thing's coming out of the air. It's going 60 miles an hour. Now I better know what I'm doing. So this is not a drone. Also, you're kind of limited on the cameras. They don't even make the X4S anymore. So you're limited to the X7 and the X5S. They're both fairly expensive. And this drone, this Inspire 2 is $3,000 without a camera. The X7 camera is about $3,500 plus another $1,200 per lens. So you're looking at $7 or $8 grand just to get the camera for the X7, the highest end. Okay. And that is a 24 megapixel camera. Okay. So let's move on. Let's say that those are your drones. And I did sit on DJI. Don't get mad at me for that. Okay. These are some charts that I've taught with in the past. And they're quick and easy for me to get to put together for you. So don't get mad at me. I definitely am all about unique. I'm all about the Autel and anything but DJI. I would love to see anybody but DJI actually out there, because DJI is so restrictive. When I go and I take off, I have to worry about where I'm at. This week I was at just outside the airport, and I'm like, well, we have 200-foot power lines and right across the street. And I'm like, well, I can only get authorization to 50 feet. I'm like, come on, this isn't realistic. Why am I stuck here? Well, it's because the FAA, and then on top of that, DJI has created a lot of hoops you have to jump through in order to fly higher. So even though the FAA said, yeah, you can go up to 100 feet, we'll let you go 50 feet higher. I said, thank you. I still had to go through the whole process of unlocking the DJI. So in that case, I hate DJI. So don't think that I'm just trying to press you here with DJI. Now, one of the things that you're gonna have to worry about is getting your certificate, passing the 107. And in order to do so, you have to go into IACRA. IACRA is the Integrated Airman Certification Rating Application. It is where back in the day when I got my pilot certificate for airplanes, the guy had a typewriter. Some of you guys probably have never seen a typewriter. He would sit there, the examiner, ding, ding, and then he would rip it off and go, here's your certificate. And I was like, oh, well. He goes, yep, that's good for 120 days, and you'll get something in the mail, which was another, they weren't like credit cards like they are today, right? So now you have to go through this new web interface and register, and you get what's called a flight tracking number, or FTN. You have to take that and go to PSI, which is PSI laser grade. It is a testing group. You go in there, you register on their website, and then you set your date and time for your test. Again, back in the day, even as long, I did my instructor, my ground instructor certification 2 years ago. I went in and to do there's 2 tests for it. I was taking one of the tests, and I came in and I just dropped in that day. Now you have to go through the website, and they say you have to be there between 10 and 12 p.m. to take your test. You get the 2-hour time slot. If you're not there, you forfeit your $150, $160. Okay, and you have a 2-hour time limit on top of that for the 107, and 60 multiple choice questions, and you need to have at least a 70% or better to pass. So you have to do that for your testing requirements. And the topics that you're going to have to know, the regulations. You're going to have to know airspace knowledge, sectional charts, flight restrictions. You're going to have to know the airport ops and certain things about frequencies. You're going to need to know about weather, aviation, in the aviation weather. So there's some weather basics that talk about just basic things like air pressure, things like standard what a standard atmosphere is. And then you have the aviation side of the weather, the METARs, the TAFs, all of that, and those are almost 2 different subjects. You have to know about loading and maintenance, crew resource management, aeronautical decision making. You need to know about physiology, and then night operations. And then after that, you have to prep for the exam. There's lots of ways to do that, right? There are training courses that you can take, right? You have the Part 107, basic flight training, advanced flight training. You got all these other things you can take. I would suggest you get into and work with a company like Dart Drones to get involved with training. Now, I worked with Dart. I was an instructor for Dart. I think Dart has the best program. It's in person and or online, and it's really good. However, there are other really, really good training groups, and I don't have them all here, but I will. I'm not here just to plug Dart. I work for Dart, so I know that you can at least count on Dart. They have a 99% pass rate. These other great groups can help you as well. And I say, choose something that's affordable, but get some training before you try to take the 107. It can only help you. Okay.
Yeah, Carl, that's the key, because I just went on to the FAA and practiced and studied, and it's overwhelming. So like Carl said, it's really advisable to utilize some of these services, because they hone in, they know the algorithms of what they're going to be covering on the exam and everything, and you actually have like-minded people that can answer those questions. So thank you, I appreciate that.
So at the Pentagon, I taught a 2-day 107 course. At SoCal Edison, we always teach 2-day 107 courses. At Florida Power and Lighting, I taught a 4-day course on 107, right? And it is immersive. It's a lot of information. It's, in my opinion, not okay just to pass it. You really need to know the information, and it can boggle your mind. Now, once you've got your 107. Or even in the meantime, while you're trying to obtain your 107, what do you need to do? Look, you need to get at least 25 hours of flight time, and that would be using practical exercises like the following. You take a flight area, create a safety zone, okay? Make sure you're behind the safety zone so you're not going to put yourself in danger of getting hit. And then do the box pattern. Basically, the box pattern, we take the drone from one cone to the other. You see the arrows taken, you go around the square, and keep that drone facing in the same direction. Now, the next time you go through it and you start practicing, you do the box pattern, and you can turn the drone to the left. So actually now start using directional control. Those are some exercises. You can do circles around a point, or what we call point of interest. And you want to keep the nose of the drone over here facing the center of the circle. And you can go clockwise and you go counterclockwise. These are great things to do while you're training and learning how to operate the drone. You can also do something that we call figure eights. Figure eights are a little more complex. But at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is you're trying to make your mind take your commands to the drone and have them basically, you're not thinking about, I need to turn right, I need to turn left. You're trying to have your mind actually control it without having any thought process, right? So it should be basically feel like natural. You're not thinking to manipulate the drone. So you want to be one with that drone. And as you're practicing, you also want to consider other ways of practicing without the GPS, maybe putting yourself in ADDI mode. Now, I suggest, and so our pilots, they have to be able to fly the box pattern, circles, figure eights in ADDI mode. And in order to fly on a windy day, they got to prove to me that they're able to fly the drone and do the mission completely in ADDI mode without GPS, because that's what happens. You'll get out on site somewhere, you'll have something funky happen, a GPS failure, and even if you have a backup, sometimes things don't work correctly, and all of a sudden you have a flyaway and you hit something, right? So
Carl, could I add to Carl while you're in the middle of that? It's very important to have what I would call spatial or 3D thinking when you're operating the aircraft, because not only horizontally are you thinking in these exercises, you could take and turn them vertically and perform those same exercises. You should be able to be competent to move within that 3D XYZ realm. Basically have it be second nature to you, where you, like Carl said, you don't think about it. It's muscle memory. It's your brain. Just you learn to do it. You put yourself in there. I just add that.
It needs to be subconscious, so you're
right.
you're not thinking, and that's what that 25 hours does for you. Okay, and you can mix it up. I know it looks boring. It is boring. Okay, you're looking at probably 3 batteries for an hour, so that's 75 battery charges to get your 25 hours. But I'm telling you, go out to an open field, go out to a practice area that's got lots of room to screw up, and get to know your drone from that perspective. Before you do anything else, don't mess with the camera. Don't do anything else. Really concentrate just on learning the drone. Okay. Learn what it's like when you get low battery. Learn what it's like to command it to come home. Learn how return to home works. There's all sorts of really weird things there. So remember, at all times, we're very, very safety conscious. Safety has to be your number one priority. And I'm telling you, people, like when I was in Dubai, the scariest thing was my good Arab friends over there. they like to play with the drone. And I'm like, guys, get behind the flight line. The M300 we were teaching on, it will kill you. It will cut your throat. You will bleed out, and we get to say prayers to Allah before you die. That's basically what we told them. And it's that dangerous, and you got to be careful. So we practice safety even with the smaller drones. I've been nicked several times, even with my little FPV drones. And I'm going to tell you what, man, I got nicked so bad. I mean, it bled for hours, and it hurts. And that's with a little FPV, so be very careful. If you have any issues, if you're in ADDI mode, switch back to your position mode, go back to GPS, take your hands off the sticks, and the drone's going to hopefully hold still for you if it has good GPS. You're going to expect disorientation when you're turning that drone, when you have the nose of that drone turning. You're going to have to learn how that works. And that's part of that the subconscious thought we want you to get there. And always, at all times, stay away from the propellers, okay? Now, the next 25 hours of time, you need to learn the camera. And what do we mean by that? Well, learn it. You got to learn how to use a camera. The first part is learning to keep the drone safe, not to crash. But then really what you're getting paid for is your knowledge of the camera. So if you don't like cameras, you're in the wrong business. Okay? If you don't like cameras, you're in the wrong business. Now, again, I'm plugging DART because I know they have a great course here. I've taught this course. It used to be an in-person course. I think it's online training only. It's fantastic. But they teach you a lot of different things in this course about the camera. It's a very cheap course. I think it's a couple $100, $150, worth your money. Take everything there, copy every slide they have, whatever, and learn it. Okay, it's very, very valuable information. Inside the course, I don't know if I have the ability. I'm going to play it real quick, and we'll let you kind of get a feel for what the course looks like. But basically, we'll turn down the volume here. Sorry. But basically, all these different units, aerial photography settings, your videography settings, and remember, I don't work for DART, so we're no longer engaged at any level in work. So I wouldn't bring it to your attention unless I thought it was worth your while. But it's a great way to get a hands-on experience with cameras. Now, you can see here, they teach you the rise and reveal, all these different shots, right? There's like a point of interest, or they call it an orbit, okay? And they have all these different shots they teach, and you can practice these shots. These are things you should be practicing on your house. You could go on a weekend to a parking lot. Maybe since COVID's over, they're not empty anymore. I don't know. But you can do all sorts of things to practice your techniques, okay? So you guys kind of get the idea of what this class will show you, okay? So I'll spare you the rest of the video. But again, your video shots, and framing shots, framing still shots, what you can do with still shots after you've done your acquisition. All of that's very important. And you need to get another 25 hours of that hands-on experience. Now, at that point, I think if you have that basic, 50 hours of experience, now you really need to get out in the field and put yourself out there. And it's going to be abusive. You're going to be with all sorts of people, all sorts of backgrounds, and you're going to be like, man, this is like the Wild West. Yes, it is. But when you get out there, I would say try to get somewhere between, and you can put in any number here. You put 100 to 300, you put in 200 to 500, you put in 500 to 1,000. I don't care what it is. Get some experience. Go out there, serve as a ground crew, serve as a visual observer, serve as a camera operator. Sean, this week we're working with Dave from Osprey Drones. He's coming down. We're going to do some. Dave at Osprey is a great drone guy. He likes to be the camera operator while we fly the wind turbines. And he's found a slick way of actually filming and using videos to film the wind turbines. And he takes still pictures from those videos. And he's found a cheap way. And man, he has got so much work. He's a great guy, but this is a case where, being a camera operator is a legitimate position, right? Obviously the guys in Hollywood, that's a place where you could be a camera operator, et cetera. Whatever it is, pilot in command, obviously you want to get that experience, but you have to put yourself out there to do that. You're not going to get paid a lot of money to learn, okay? There are hundreds of companies. Sky Gear Solution, Daniel Herbert, great guy, wonderful guy. has given so many opportunities to young pilots in the utilities. He's doing cell towers now. Bird's Eye Aerials, doing a bunch of utilities, California, C2 Group, California, Skyscopes, California. Drone Services, Texas, they're one of our competitors here in town. Wayne, he's a great guy. He needs drone pilots. Texas Drone Company. Jared's trying to hire a full-time guy, there. Drone Service Texas needs full-time guys, and we need pilots. So there are places, once you have got some basics, there are places where you can go and insert yourself for half a year, whatever. Okay, there's hundreds of places, and you have to do that in order to get the experience. Okay, remember that the experience can't be taught. I don't care what you say. You go to as many dart drones classes as you want. It's great for knowledge. It's great to expand your knowledge, but you must get experience by doing it. I promise you, that's one of the biggest things I think DART needs to express to their companies is when you sign up for that $10,000 2-day training or whatever it's cost. I'm telling you right now, these guys pay a lot of money corporately to do the training. And they really should caveat it and say, you're not going to be up and running the next day. This takes practice. It takes lots and lots of time. So it's very difficult. Now, once you've done that, you've got all this experience. My advice to you, go back and get some more advanced training. And understand what your deliverables are. What deliverables do you need? Pretty pictures, videos, okay? That's one thing. Reality mesh, what is that? We'll look at that. CAD drawings, advanced AI tools. All of these things are great. And then even advanced data repositories. Let's talk about each of these really quickly. So now that you got your experience, basically, how are you going to then make money on your own, right? And eventually you're going to form your company. We'll talk about that at the end. So let's see if we have, this is a video. So this is an example of a video I did in Dubai, right? This is where the ruler, this is his office. It's a pretty cool building. And this was the actual haze in the sky at the time. That's a 1,500-foot building. It's huge. And they have this at the very base, they have this new thing. Now, as a drone pilot, you should be able to create really good content, right? This is an example of me having a day off where I had basically 3 batteries to fly, and we got to go see the Museum of the Future in Dubai, right? And it's a fantastic way for us to document, the time I was there. Now, they were still working on it, just opened. You can see the taglines from the guys that are working on it now, but it was just a fantastic way for me to document my time there. And you see it's pretty eloquent, it's pretty good. But guys, I am a crappy videographer. I'm a completely crappy videographer. So you have to learn this. You have to make it a staple, and you need to, at the very minimal, you need to be able to take pretty pictures and nice videos and pull them together in sort of a video presentation. That at a minimal, you should be able to do, and that should be something you're working on at the very beginning after you get your 50 hours. Now, as you get more advanced, you can see here, you've got reality mesh. Now, reality mesh is pretty interesting. And at the end of the day, I'm going to show you a couple of examples. So I don't know if you guys can see my screen here. Can you guys see let's see, I'm going to put it up.
We can see the diagram if that's what you're wondering.
Are you looking at the person down there? Nope.
Nope, can't see the
Okay,
person.
here, hang on. I'm trying to find, this is where I get into the trouble of, I'm gonna stop sharing,
Okay.
excuse me, and I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna share, and it should be up, maybe, oh goodness. Oh, here it is. It's the first thing. Okay. Let's go back into here. So now you see this was a mock stage scene in Valdez where we took an M200 and basically a tape measure, and we laid it across the ground, right? And I can go so far as to this is kind of, it's not the perfect thing in the world, but I can come through and I can take measurements, right? So by hitting this triangle, I can say, okay, here's a distance. It looks like 1 foot to here. And you can see it, well, it's in units because it didn't actually bring in the GPS. But you can do string line measurements. You can do volume. You can do other things. You can look and rotate. This is called a reality mesh. Let's see here. I'm going to bring up another reality mesh just for the sake of, can you guys, okay, you see this? What are you guys seeing on the screen here?
We're just seeing the person with the tape.
Are you still seeing the person with the tape?
Yes.
Because I think I might have gotten myself into some trouble here with, Okay, here we go.
While you're remedying that, Carl, could I break in, guys? There's a couple questions real quick that on the topic you just touched on, Carl. One, when you were showing the companies, do you know, do you have a name of any women-owned drone companies that you can think of, or Maggie?
Well, I know that we have several with the women in drones. I have a company here in Texas, UAS Plus Services. But that's a great resource using women in drones, their website. They do have a list, and they also have, and you know, Sharon, you could interject, they have a job site. So companies can actually, you know, post positions, and then vice versa. If you are a pilot or any of those needed positions like data collection and camera operators, or even a visual observer, you can put your resume on there. So that's always a good resource. But Kim Penn knows that because she's part of Women in Drones.
Okay.
There's definitely resources there.
Excellent. Carl, I'll let you continue on. I've got one more question for you. We can touch on it at the end, though.
Okay, are you guys able to see the cell tower?
Yes, we can see the.
So this was with an M300 50 millimeter.
Now I can't hear you at all, Carl.
I think Carl stalled out there.
Okay.
Looks like he may have. It looks like his bandwidth may have dropped here, real quick, guy. I think he, Maggie, I believe, and everybody that's here.
I'm back, Sean. Sorry.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, I got kicked off, so I apologize. Let's see if we can get back in, and I'll just continue on here without showing you models. I'm sure you're not interested in the models. Now, what's really weird is, are you guys still there?
We are.
Yeah, we are.
So I apologize. Let's see if I can get back to my presentation. Okay, here's the presentation. Again, now we also have a CAD, right? We'll take those models that you just saw me spinning around, and we'll take it and put it into CAD. And that CAD is then actually usable for structural inspections, et cetera. So we'll take thicknesses, we'll climb the tower, we'll take a caliper, we'll get thicknesses, and basically that is one of our deliverables to our customers. Okay, so it's a fantastic way of extending not just your pretty pictures, not your videos, not reality mesh, your mapping. Now you're getting into other business applications, A&E, architectural, engineering, construction, etc. Here we have AI crack detection, right? So that's a very useful way of implementing our drone flights. We'll take that mesh and we'll bring together AI. So I'll show you that for 2 seconds because it is I think a worthwhile thing to show. So let me try and bring that up.
I'm amazed at this point of the technology. I mean, you know, you can actually see, like if you were talking about cracks in the buildings and things like that, and you can determine where there is a breach by just doing the thermal, reading and everything like that. And the thickness of the metal now, is that true?
Yeah, we have a thickness, metal thickness reader. Here's an example. If we wanted to show issues, we can see all the rust issues. I can right click on it, right? And it's going to show me for a given image where the rust is. And it shows me corrosion. I can actually generate reports on that corrosion, right? I can zoom in on that corrosion and take a look at it, right? So sometimes it takes a minute for the zoom to come in. But here I can zoom to all these points and look at it. These are fantastic extensions of my drone flight. My mapping mission, I turn this into something very useful. Now, here's a ditch. We did a mile, I think 1.5 miles, Sean. I don't remember. It was a long.
I'm not seeing your screen share, Maggie. Are you able to see it?
No, I'm not either. But Carl, I mean, we've got about 4 minutes. And I think one of the things that I want you to emphasize is that by going into the drone industry, trying to grow your business, this is really where the money is. You know, the services that you're showing us are an extension of just taking those pretty pictures. And that's why, you know, we really wanted to encourage the attendees to see the possibilities. And I mean, we're talking from, you know, it used to be we would charge $100, $250 for a real estate picture. And now we're getting into more detailed data collection so that we can provide our customers with the state-of-the-art programming, software programming, so that, we can charge up to, this is not my business, so tell me a little bit more of the variance from taking the photography for real estate versus, measuring the thickness of a metal or the corrosion. I know that one example was Memphis, the bridge, they were able to determine that there were corrosion where they couldn't get to this area without having a drone.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit of capability. And at the end of the day, you're upcharged, instead of like if I'm out there flying cell towers for Daniel, I'm gonna get paid maybe $125 to $200 to fly the cell tower. I can fly 5 to 8 of those in a day, depending on what time of year it is. So I'll make $1,000 a day. And it's hard work. I'd rather fly, a tower or something and make, $1,200 to $2,000 for that mission and not have to sit there and kill myself, for weeks on end. So that's what we try to do, is find clever new ways to take technology to another level. So again, whether you're doing CAD, crack detection, corrosion detection, or you have your own data repositories, really, you need to get advanced training. This is where once you get your experience, now you can focus in on some things that make more sense. And this training can be also on the job training. Last, we'll kick it for 1 minute, starting a company. Let me explain to you. There's a guy who's going to come on after myself. He's going to talk about other opportunities, but I'm going to tell you right now, our costs are stupid. I think we pay, $1,000 a month for business insurance, $1,000 a month for drone insurance. We pay at least, $1,000 something a month for equipment. Our vehicles, another $700 or $800. The office is this. The data repository, just to keep our stuff in a colo, is about $1,400 a month. Customer portals cost money. We have overhead costs of our employees. The payment terms. We do a job. I'm still out money that I did back in December. And what is it? It's March. That is common, 60, 90, 120 days, because you do the job, and it takes time to get the data, and you're waiting to finish your reports. So
Right.
if you don't have that ability, you're in big trouble. You need an SOP. You better be able to do maintenance. You better be good at operations. You better have software tools, and you have costs for those. For us, Drone Deploy is a basic tool. We use it, not a whole lot, but it's a really nice quick QC tool we use. That's $3,500 a year. Bentley, we have 8. We have 2 clusters of 4. That's about $8,000 every quarter, right? We have Agisoft. That's $3,000. We have Esri. That's another $5,000 a year. I mean, look, to have a business, man, to get to a level that you're doing something is a very long road to hoe. Man, I'm telling you, it's very, very long. And then you have sales and marketing. And basically right now we're not doing a lot of sales and marketing because we have enough work, but oh my God, that's basically our presentation. We did finish in an hour. There's
Yeah,
no
we
more,
did great.
there's no more slides, but guys, if you're wanting, your idea is to get into this business, it is blood, sweat, and tears, right? And it's very, very difficult. And I'm telling you, you better have some money saved up, because I'm broke as a joke right now, and we're doing pretty well. And it's tough. It's very
Yeah,
tough.
and I would say that you also have to have the blood, sweat, and tears, but you also have to have the passion, because if you don't have
Exactly.
a passion for this, then you're going to run out and you're going to burn out really fast.
Very
Thank you
fast.
so much. And just so the audience is aware, number one, this is recorded. Number two, reach out to either Sean or Carl, if you want some more advice, if you want, maybe you've got some great information there. I would love you to share that with audience if they do want it. It's really important also, we're going to be putting up our survey. Please put your survey so that they can get feedback of the information that they gave out. I would really appreciate it. And on to our next, Sharon Rossmark is going to be interviewing with Mike Byrne with Blue Nose Aerial. And this is a new concept. So Sharon, take it away. Thanks, Carl, and I appreciate it, Sean.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Maggie. And can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much. So as Maggie just indicated for our next speaker, but let me just do a little bit of a setup. Building upon the conversation as previously presented by Sean and Carl, my next guest today presents a new option for those with an entrepreneurial spirit. who may be interested in starting a drone franchise business through Blue Nose Aerial. So joining me for this conversation is Mike Byrne. Mike is a business development executive at Blue Nose Aerial Imagery, which is a veteran-owned business, which is also a franchise. So before we dive into my questions, Mike has prepared a few slides to highlight the information, and then we'll take questions. So Mike, please take a minute to further introduce yourself and then share your presentation.
Awesome. Well, good morning. I'd like to start off by thanking everyone for taking time out of your busy weekend to join us this morning. I know on a Saturday, we all have probably a laundry list of to-do items to get to, so we really do appreciate your time. My name is Mike Byrne. I joined Blue Nose Aerial Imaging about a year and a half ago. Prior to that, I had spent maybe 25 years in the software space in sales and sales management. And in the twilight of my software career, I started working for a GIS company here on Vancouver Island in Canada. And the synergies in what they were doing with drones and delivering services was really impressive. And I really enjoyed and sort of got hooked into the space from that perspective. And then I crossed paths with Blue Nose Aerial a little bit later on, and the rest has been history. So we're onward and upward moving forward. I can't, you're muted, Sharon.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
How many times have we done it in the last 2.5 months?
No
Too
worries.
many to count.
Yeah. So why don't you go ahead and share your slides and kind of walk us through your initial presentation, and then we'll take questions.
Okay, just let me get the slide deck up, and then I'll make sure I got the right Zoom screen shared, and then we'll fly here.
Okay.
All right. Back to Zoom. Share the slide. There we go. I think that should be the right order, I think, correct?
Yes. Yes, we can see the slides just fine. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll try and make this as interactive as possible. Like, no one likes death by slide deck, so I'll try and slide through this. So basically, who is Blue Nose Aerial? Because franchising is a different model, especially in this industry. But we were founded in 2020, right just when COVID landed. And our president and CEO, Tanner Harris, he's an airline pilot, ex-military pilot, and he flies for United. So he was looking for an opportunity to sort of start a drone services business, as a sideline gig, something that he could, start leveraging and building while he wasn't in the air flying, because most commercial airline pilots have a pretty interesting schedule where they're, work on 1 week or off 2 weeks. So they have a lot of spare time. So that was the concept behind, the thought that he wanted to bring to this space. So as it stands right now, we're the first and presumably the only drone services franchise in North America. We currently have 37 franchises and growing, where we're adding anywhere from 4 to 5 new franchises a month. From a profile perspective, I would say, who is Blue Nose Aerial? The vast majority of our franchises are either active commercial airline pilots or active military airline pilots. And then there's a smaller demographic, and it's growing rapidly right now, that these are folks that don't come from the aviation background, or they don't come from the military space, and they're interested in creating a franchise. So from that perspective, that's who Blue Nose Aerial is. So as it stands, we're starting to really gain a lot of traction in a lot of different sectors. And that sort of ties into the why Blue Nose Aerial. Why should someone be thinking about Blue Nose Aerial if they're looking to get into the drone industry? As Carl explained during his presentation, it's not a simple task. And I wouldn't say it's easy, but if you apply the same kind of, well, not the same, but if you apply proven, processes to move your business forward, and these aren't pioneering, concepts, these are, proven track rollouts and workflows that have helped propel drone service companies into the market. That's what we focus on here. I leverage 25 years of sales and sales marketing, and we bring that to the table to really help support the folks moving forward. But why Blue Nose Aerial? One of the key traits of an active airline pilot, right, that's flying for a commercial airline, is standardization. especially from the military perspective as well. So one of the key takeaways I want everyone to sort of draw from the presentation is one of our strengths is we bring that standardization down across the board. So it's attractive to new prospects coming into the franchise pipeline, but it's also really attractive to national contracts and relationships that we've been able to establish over the last 2 years. And what I mean by that is because we train all of our franchises to a specific standardized delivery process for those deliverables that Carl was talking about, you know, it makes it sort of simple for us to sort of put that on the table from a deliverable perspective to a national account, whereby if you're, you know, if you have aerial imaging needs up in New England, we can deliver that there. But by the same token, if you're in Southern California and you need the same deliverable, you're getting the same deliverable no matter where you go. So all of the Blue Nose Aerial franchises are trained to that same standardized process where we deliver the services in the same way. From our perspective, it's what's worked in airline, in commercial air, in the commercial aviation industry. And we all know that military is all about standardization. So with those two components, we bring those, you know, those processes to the table, which really helps Blue Nose Aerial turn the corner and deliver the same type of service to every client we approach. So it's really worked out really well for us. So our long-term goal is we want to be the premier provider of drone services across the country. And if you looked at the map on that last slide, that's where all of our current franchisees are. And we're late on about adding 7 or 8 more of those icons to that map. But as we start focusing across the map, we want to be able to have one of those icons in every city of 100,000 people. You know, that's our primary goal, is to go across the states and make sure that we have one franchise in every city that has at least 100,000 of a population base. So that's our mission. And that's what we're working really hard to do. How do we sort of deliver on all those variables? Because again, at the end of the day, like from the corporate perspective, the way the organization is structured is we try to help facilitate our franchisees by developing these national relationships with large companies. At the individual franchise level, it's up to them to make sure that they're still filling their funnel with opportunities and business opportunities as they start progressing. So they have to go through all the networking, they have to do their normal business development activities. But what we do to support the mission statement and to support that track is we've developed the Blue Nose Academy. And the Blue Nose Academy is a web portal. And what we've done is if you look at the last presentation, there's a lot of variables that you guys have to sort of have a solid grasp on and like a foundation in order to effectively deliver drone services. One of our strengths is we've been able to, at the organization level, bring the different resources together that are, I wouldn't say professionals, but they're all subject matter experts in their individual fields. I wouldn't call myself a professional business development representative, but I've been in sales and marketing for a long time. I worked for Quest Software, I worked for Dell, I worked for AVG, I worked for SolarWinds. So I've worked for a lot of the big companies. So I would say I know sales and marketing. So as that relates to business development, I can bring my skill sets to that section of the table. But what we've also done, and we've also realized, is that's one area of building a business. Where the rubber hits the road, you got to know how to sell it. But you also have to know and understand everything else Carl was talking about previously. You have to understand videography. You should understand what photography is, and you have to have at least 1 foot in the GIS pond, understanding all those deliverables. Right, so it's really important. What we've done to support our franchises is, again, we have relationships at a corporate level with national entities, but we also focus on, you know, teaching the fishermen how to fish per se. So it's an analogy, it's tried and true, but it really does work. So what we've done is, in the business development component of our training, every new franchisee gets a dedicated business development rep for 6 months, for their first 6 months. That would be the kin of having a salesperson at your disposal, right? But what we do is that person liaisons with the franchise owner, and we work off blueprints. These are blueprints that we've crafted for all of the industries that we're targeting. And let me just advance one more slide, because as I'm talking, I'm looking at the next slide and going, that's the slide I should be on, which I apologize. What we did is a little over a year and a half ago, we looked at, and we did not an exhaustive search, but we went to Gartner, we went to Forrester, and we looked at what the Magic Quadrant was telling us in terms of what are the rising stars for drone services, meaning what are the industries that have the fastest growing deliverables in drone services. And Forrester, Goldman Sachs had a wonderful article last year, and it listed these 5 industry sectors as the fastest growing industry sectors for drone services. So what we did is we don't want to pioneer brand new methodologies of going into these industries. We want to sort of build upon proven methodologies that have been successful in the drone services world. Having the number of franchisees that we're working with, as well as some of the guys have been delivering drone services for like 3 to 4 years now, we have proven histories of how to attack the construction industry, how to go after video if you want, because like what was mentioned is until you get to that point where you're really comfortable in the GIS world and in those other deliverables, real estate photography and other, videography type like opportunities are good teeth cutting, contracts that you can sort of build up your hours, get your skills in and everything else. But what we've done is if you want to go after agriculture, if you want to go into property management, if you want to attack the construction industry, what we've done is we've built blueprints. These are documents that are carved into 3 core sections. You have the foundational component, and the foundational component basically dives into everything you need to have as a drone service provider to deliver services into that space. What gear, what sensors, PPE, right down, what training, what software, like if you're going into construction, if you're not using hammer missions or drone deploy, like what are your deliverables, right? So we sort of cover off everything you need to do to deliver services in that space. The second section of the blueprints is our messaging, right? And that's really important because a lot of times we're bringing services to industries where they understand and they can see shiny object, really cool, but why do I need to, why do I need volumetrics? Why do I need, time-lapse imagery of a site progression? What this section of all the blueprints pertains to is it gives us that audible ready talk track to respond to that question. So if you're talking to a superintendent at a construction company and he or she says, that's great, but why, volumetrics, that's interesting, but what do I need volumetrics for? Well, in the blueprint, volumetrics, and it gives you a blurb on why volumetrics is important to that site superintendent for that construction company, and or why is time-lapse, site progression important. So we have all the relevant blurbs that help you sort of generate a little bit of that street credibility in the conversation you're having with that prospect. But more so, we're just building that, that muscle memory for how to generate that conversation into that space. The final section of all the blueprints is called the go-to-market. And it speaks for itself, is how to market, sell, how to get into that space, how to lead gen into that space, because that's not a simple task, right? A lot of people, and I have that conversation weekly with the new franchises as they come in, when I ask them, so, it's a big world out there, what industries do you want to tackle? And then we start, expanding on that conversation. And then when we get down to the point of the conversation where the rubber's hitting the road, it's okay, great. Well, then this is what you need to understand. These are the components you have to look at. And there's a couple of identified gaps up here because you're missing some of the required deliverables in order to deliver service to that space. So it kind of gives us a 3-dimensional, platform to sort of point our franchises in the right direction, because we can help them and sort of augment some of their revenue by, with the corporate contracts and relationships we've developed. But at the same time, they still got to get out there and, sell services for themselves. What we've also done, and it kind of makes a lot of sense, and I think everyone will understand this, is we have buying power now. because we're not like just one drone services provider going up and say, I need X. It's me and 35 and growing of my best friends. So we've been able to secure some pretty decent price points on software from a business management standpoint. Like Slack, I think is, pretty standard from a internal communication platform, but based on Slack's ability to interact with other Slack platforms, we can have all of our corporate partners, we can provide them with their own specific channel in our Slack instance. So that it just streamlines the communication flow with them. So if they have a new and up and coming opportunity, they'll post that in their Slack channel, and then our franchise base can then see that, can poke into it, ask, a couple more questions about the deliverables, what are the requirements, and they could sort of flush the job out from there. And it just works really, really well. So Slack is a key component, and it's integral to our conversations back and forth. Again, one of the other points when I mentioned just previously, in our Blue Nose Academy, we have modules on, really in-depth on how to use, Adobe Lightroom Classic, how to edit videos. We have a whole module on videography. And again, we have a series of courses on, GIS and that world. So I'm not saying that's unique to the space, because YouTube's filled with that stuff, right? And I'm sure, everyone in this room has seen a lot of those videos, and they're all great, videos. They all provide great content. One of the differences that I find, and it's a different differentiator for us, is if you go watch any of those YouTube videos and you have some lingering questions, you can toss those into the chat. And who knows what the percentage, the odds will be that you get responded to. But one of the beauties about our ecosystem is all of the presenters and all of the instructors in the academy are on Slack every single day. So if you were to watch a GIS presentation from Jason Sansucci, our resident GIS scientist, and you had a question specifically about, LiDAR or multispectral imagery in the ag world, all that, you could poke him on Slack and have an instant dialogue conversation back and forth. Same with our videographer, same with myself, and same with our photographer, the entity who sort of is our go-to for editing pictures and everything else. On this slide, G Suite, I don't want to belabor too much time on that. HubSpot is a business management platform that, my goodness, it takes a lot of the guesswork out of just that closing loop from marketing into pipeline and sales management. It's just a business management platform that allows for more transparency in managing your sales right from fruition to close. So if anyone isn't a customer and they don't, pardon me, if you're not aware of what HubSpot is, I would Google HubSpot because it's a pretty powerful platform. Scout is our precision ag platform. We went out and we partnered with the #1 precision ag provider in this space, and that's another tool that we've brought to the table for our franchise base. So we have enterprise license of Scout. And just as an FYI, Scout is sold by the platform that Precision Hawk uses for their precision ag as well. So it's a very well respected and trusted platform in the industry. So we offer that as well as Drone Deploy to all of our franchisees because those are heavy costs, right? And that's a big lift for a sole operator. But because we're an organization of 35 and growing, we do have buying power. So we get much better pricing, and we can then transfer and provide that savings to our franchise base. This is something that comes out of the military. I was way back in the day, I won't date myself, but from 83 to 88, I was a combat engineer in Canada. So this culture eat strategy for breakfast is a well-known military term. Everyone understands that. And we live and breathe this stuff. Like we really do, because we're a team, we help each other. Our entire goal is to, all rising waters will lift all boats. So if we could bring that structure to the table for every franchise, and then in turn, every franchise brings that to all of their customers, we're doing the right thing and we're pointed in the right direction. And from our perspective, that's when culture eats strategy for breakfast. So apart from that, that's about it from the slide perspective, Sharon.
Great. Well, thank you, Mike. And Right now, I don't see any questions in the chat. So if our audience has any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. But Mike, I, of course, have some questions for you. So
Cool.
first of all, thanks again for the presentation. I like the way it's well packaged for someone new coming into the industry. And I think I heard you say early on that while initially a lot of your franchisees are commercial and military airline pilots, you're seeing an increased number of the people coming from other fields. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
it is. In the beginning, when Tanner first started it, like, you know, on a shoestring budget, he was bootstrapping the entire thing. Just word of mouth within the community, the airline community was, you know, it attracted a lot, and then word of mouth from there. And he, you know, 3 people told 3 people, and that's the way we went. So I think it was probably last spring is when we started doing our first outbound marketing efforts, like small ones here, run an ad here, do a webinar here. So we started attracting more and more people that weren't from that industry. And from our perspective, it's not a requirement. You don't have to be a commercial airline pilot or an active or retired military person. If you have a desire to be a drone service provider, we want to be able to make that available to you. Right. So yeah, you do not have to be a drone, an airline commercial pilot or in the military.
Okay, great. And are there any monthly sales requirements for your franchisees?
No, me, I'd love there to be, because that's just my background and my, you know, it's in my DNA, right? But again, the genesis of the idea was something where, you know, people could run a business and not to be constantly under the gun for deliverables and commitments and revenue points and everything else. Because Tanner wanted to create an ecosystem where, you know, your success is in front of you. Is how hard you want to work, it's there. But we wanted to use more carrot than stick, right? So there's just their regular fees, and we have no sales targets.
Okay. And when you say regular fees, can you just give us those category of fees that they have to, like a franchise fee, a monthly franchise?
It's a technology fee. It's a small technology fee they pay monthly. And then there's a royalty component to all of their business that they close. And
Okay.
it's 6% royalties, and that's pretty standard in the franchise world. When it comes to franchise and revenue, we're all franchises within the US are governed by the FCC. So when it comes to, like, I can't stand up here and say, hey, if you become a Blue Nose Aerial franchise, you're going to generate this kind of revenue. So it's against the law for us to say that. But yeah, in terms of what the fees are, the tech fee is a nominal fee. It's like it's under 500, well under 500, and the royalties are 6%.
Okay, great. And then what about territories? Generally, when you purchase or buy into a franchise system, there's a territory. So I know you said that you're looking to have a franchise per 100,000 population size cities. What type of territories do you all have?
100,000. There's an app, and a lot of people can use it. It's a free open app. It basically it's for drawing sales territories, right?
Okay.
So we use that. And it's not, there could be like 96,000 or it could be 110,000, but we carve off their areas. And here's the easiest way to look at the Blue Nose Aerial territories. No other Blue Nose Aerial franchise can sell in your territory without, you know, personal consent from you. But you can sell anywhere else in North America where there is no territory. So you're not locked to your territory. That's your exclusive playground where no one else, that's your sandbox. There's no other kids playing in your sandbox. So that's the best way to look at the franchise territory map for Blue Nose Aerial. We give you a territory and it's based on 100,000 people. And then we don't lock you to that. So you could sell your services anywhere in North America you want it to, providing it wasn't in another Blue Nose Aerial franchise's 100,000 person population territory.
Okay, so given that probably many of our audience members today are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, how do you take a major metropolitan city like Dallas and divvy it up? So let's say I live in one city or one zip code, but there's already a Blue Nose Aerial franchise in that in that zip code where I live. So I can no longer, I can't sell if my neighbor has a business in that zip code, I cannot sell there. And then how do you divide up the rest of that general market?
Great question. It actually happened in Pensacola and Raleigh. If you look at our map, they're close together. There's two areas where, for whatever reason, we had some traction and guys wanted franchises. In the areas that are super close together, like in Pensacola, they're back to back, right? It's east and west is basically the way they divided it. Now, ironically enough, one's still active Marine and one's commercial airline pilot. So they play off each other really, really well. So when one's in the air, you know, the other will fill in and, you know, could help him out with jobs that he's already got booked and vice versa. Same thing in the Raleigh area. So the beauty about our about the territories is all the territory means is no one else can sell in your territory unless you give them permission to, but it doesn't prevent you from selling anywhere else, right? So in the areas where there are, like, especially in the Dallas and in Texas, we have 3 franchises right now. Now, none of which are all in the same city per se, but eventually there will be. So it's typically a collaborative perspective. Like you generate your business in your territory, right? And that's where you would primarily do, focus your efforts. But if an opportunity were to spill it across the border into your neighboring Blue Nose Aerial franchise, then you just have a conversation with them and away you go. So it's never punitive. We encourage all the guys and gals to sort of, amongst themselves work those deals out, and it's been working out seamlessly, like right from the get-go. So it works I would say really, really well.
Okay, so if I'm in Fort Worth, Texas, and let's say that the population is more than, maybe it's 300,000. I don't know what the population is, or maybe it's 400,000. Can I buy 3 or 4 franchises and just buy it in that market? Okay.
Yeah, there is an opportunity to buy additional territories. Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's been one gentleman has done it so far because he saw an opportunity coming down the pipe. So it was a situation where he just thought, well, I better get ahead of this.
Great. And then in terms of insurance, we heard Sean and Carl talk about the amount of money that they are having to spend monthly on various aspects of insurance policies. And I noticed that you all are able to collaborate with some of those other industries for discounts. And I know insurance can't offer discounts, but sometimes there's a way that makes sure that we can get everyone in. Mm-hmm. What type of insurance do you require? And have you been able to have any package policies available for your franchisees?
Yeah, we work, the name of the company is eluding me right now, and I apologize. I'll get back to you on that. But all of our guys run through that one company. They don't offer us deals, but everyone is paying on average, because here's one of the big differences with our franchises. I would say of the 35 plus franchises, 2 have more than one person in them. One brought in 2 other people, so it's a 3-pack, and another one of our franchises has there's 2 people in it. Everyone else is a sole operator. So as such, most of the plans that all of the franchises have, and it's interesting because as part of the onboarding process, what we want to do is full transparency. We have a worksheet that's the budget estimator, and we just factor in right down to your cell phone, right? How much money are you going to be allocating to your business on a monthly basis? And this is to get ROI, right? Because you also want to understand how many hours are you putting into your business? How many hours can you allocate to your business? And then we get an average amount of money that you should be generating on an hourly basis to cover, your overhead. So that is the foundational component of the business development support, which then points to one of the line items of what their monthly, expenses is insurance, and it's typically from $80 to $100.
Okay, great.
So pretty straightforward. And
it looks like we have a question pop up, and then we'll close out. What is the common drone you use?
As it stands right now, all of the guys were using the Mavic 2. That comes with the platform, and right now it's the Mavic 3.
Okay, great. Well, Mike, we're out of time. I want to thank you so much for sharing the information about your franchise system. I think our audience will agree that this is something new and exciting. And so once we transition over to our next speaker, if you could drop your contact information in the chat, it will allow anyone that has follow-up questions to connect with you. Thanks again for your time today. And Maggie, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, guys. Take care.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate that. And just, there was a couple other questions like Sheba was asking, do you have to have the 24 hours is it mandatory for the 107 certificate? And no, Sheba, it's not mandatory. It is advised. And then also, what is the process to log in 24-hour flight time? You can do it manually, but there are services out there that will keep track. I think Airlink is one of them, to keep track of your flight time. So I think overview, what's really important is that whether you utilize a fantastic platform like Blue Nose Aerial, or you just reach out to your local resources. In other words, a UVSI could connect you with people. There are drone clubs out in the area. Try to find that the like-minded people out there and resources. I would also suggest that when you've got all these platforms and all these software and everything like that, you focus on one, and get good at that, and then move on to the next. Speaking of moving on to the next, Evan Morelli, he's always ending our workshop with some great advice on safe practices, but he's also got some tips on business. So Evan, take it away. Thank you.
And thanks, Maggie. I appreciate it. Let me go ahead and just share the presentation. Hope you all can see that. Okay.
We can see it.
There we go.
Good.
All right, so my name is Evan Morelli. I run Elm Aerial Services. I worked with Maggie and Shannon a bunch, sharing a bunch with our previous work in the past. I've also worked in the insurance field as far as doing roof inspections with reliable reports. And to what we were talking about earlier about what drones are to use, I've used the Skydio drone for hundreds of hours. And what we're talking about with its detect and avoid, it's impressive. It's probably my favorite personal drone. I've flown a bunch of different DJI drones, Autel drones, but for the autonomous inspections that I did across DFW, at first it was a little nerve-wracking because it would get within 6 inches of these roofs. But after a couple hundred hours of doing their AI testing, but also doing real life application and real life claims, I'm very solidified in my confidence with their product. It's great. I think the Skydio 2 is a great drone. So step by step, we're going to talk about, we've talked about a little bit about, how to get started as far as gaining base level experience and getting into maybe a franchise or what have you as far as soliciting work. What I'm going to talk today is a little bit about the hierarchy of what positions you need to think about filling and how you need to think about structuring your business, as well as more specific on-site and pre-flight considerations. So more of like a meat and potatoes of an actual operation. So we'll start with on-site considerations. Once you get to your site, hold on a second. I think I missed out some of nope, that's right. Didn't want to hide the wrong slides. So on-site considerations, you need to make sure that you have visual line of sight. You need to make sure that you have subject to weather visibility limitations, your night flying requirements, whether you've done your pre-flight planning, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But visual line of sight is extremely important, and it's going to lead into what I'm talking about when it comes to your visual observer, your pilot in command, and what I think is important. 2 other positions I think are important, which is, if you do have a cameraman, depending upon the nature of the data that you're collecting, because 99% of the job that you're doing is some sort of visual data collection, right? Whether that be LiDAR, radar, scanning, videography, what have you. It's really, drones are like a wrench, and they're there to put a light detection sensor of some sort into the air to collect that data. And then that data is ultimately your deliverable. So visual line of sight is extremely important. It's required. We are moving to an era where you can start to get beyond visual line of sight, but that's still down the road quite a bit. So those operations aren't really super relevant at this time. So the other thing to really consider is when you get onto a property, whether that's being a neighborhood, which some neighborhoods are more or less an issue with this, but especially if you're in an urban environment, it's RF interference. What was talked about earlier was how you're going to eventually have a drone drop out of the sky. I can speak to Maggie and Mai's experience. We have a Phantom sitting at the bottom of Lake Michigan because we got RF interference and it caused it to kind of lose its mind and it just went right into the lake. It happens. But you also have to be very mindful of your RF connection, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But RF interference, invisible metal objects are going to cause RF interference. They're going to cause issues with your GPS compass, right? And that initial calibration. If you're getting issues with your DJI drone or any of the other drones that says like your compass calibration's off, don't play with that because it's not going to understand its orientation. It's not going to understand its attitude and its altitude and what have you. And it's going to be off, even unless you're flying completely manually, it's still going to be off, right? So be wary of underground rebar. Maggie and I were doing a job a couple of weeks ago where we were over up in McKinney and we had to, there's a train track, there was power lines, there was it was an old cotton factory and there's just a ton of metal everywhere. So we really had to find a kind of offbeat spot to launch and return to make sure that the drone could calibrate, get its return to home processes put together properly. So that's one of those things that, look for grass areas, take a landing pad with you. So you have a nice flat area, kind of doctor and set up your space that you're going to be launching and returning from. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But radio and cell interference can also be a problem. When you have your RF connections, most of the drones you buy off the shelf are going to have, FCC licensed, connection plans. But that doesn't mean as you get more advanced, you can't get your ham license and start using 1.3 gigahertz, 900 megahertz, what have you, for more extended range or for additional data or higher than 1 milliwatt power. So that's something that you got to keep into consideration because, the connection stream is more of a bell curve when you get into those type of connection, the non-specifically like FCC licensed connection plans. And so when you have cell towers or ham radios going for like emergency services and things like that, you can get some partial interference that can interrupt your connection. So speaking of connection planning, the main things to consider are your power, your frequency, and antenna positioning, right? You always want to have your antennas sitting at about a 45-degree angle or 90-degree angle from one another, but they should always be pointing at your drone. And that's specifically normal to the drone, which normal means if you're from an engineering background that it's perpendicular, right? You don't want it directly pointing, like unless it's a linear antenna. That's a little different, but you want it to be pointing because the RF, the band waves come off of the side of the antenna, not directly on the forward. And most of the antennas that you're going to buy are going to have a graphic that will show the way that the antenna reacts to electromagnetic waves and such. So, there are going to be dead zones on those antennas at certain angles where it doesn't have as good a connection as it would have otherwise. So, again, interference can be a factor on it, but it can also be positioning. The power, as you put increased power, right, take 5.8 gigahertz, which is Wi-Fi, versus 2.4 gigahertz, which is Bluetooth. It's half the frequency, so it's half the data, but it's twice the range at the same power level. Well, you can get around that by jacking up the power. And then again, now you're outside of a mandated, set of parameters, and you have additional responsibilities when interacting with the airspace in that capacity. So that's something to keep a factor in because the amount of data that you're trying to receive, whether it's high data, like a lot of data, you're trying to stream 4K, or you're taking a lot of, telemetry, CAD, scanning, LiDAR data, you have to make that decision. Am I going to track and keep that data on the drone entirely and then hope I got it when I laid back down, which had its own, complications and factors to it? Or am I going to stream a lot of that data down to my control center, right? That's going to affect your connection planning. So those are things that you really need to consider about the level of sophistication of your setup. So your wind and weather conditions, I always recommend that you want to look at, in Texas, man, they can tell you it's going to rain on Friday and then ends up being 100 degrees, right? It's very difficult to predict. So you really want to keep on top of it. Having a 24 to 48 hour, like pre-flight check of the weather conditions, the wind conditions, being aware of your OEM flight parameters of your drone. If it is off the shelf, it's going to be in the manual, or you can look it up, right? If it handle wind gusts of 20 miles an hour, make sure that there's not wind going on. Right now in DFW, it's pretty windy. We're overcast, it's really humid, which is going to change the air density, and it's really windy. So, you want to make sure that you're flying within OEM parameters. And I always recommend having a handheld wind gauge with you as part of your kit, because the resolution on weather data isn't super finite, and where you are may be not necessarily representative of the average. You could also be in an urban environment where high buildings cause a kind of wind tunnel effect that you weren't necessarily expecting. And you need to have that knowledge to make sure you're operating safely. Allow for flexibility. That's also super important. You need to be able to communicate with your client continuously, whether you're the operations manager, the pilot in command. You need to be able to talk to your customer and be like, look, if it's like this, if it's like this, if these conditions are met, we're going to have to reschedule. Or if, it's too overcast, if you don't have good lighting, depending upon the nature of your job, make sure you're communicative with your client, because it ultimately is up to the pilot in command whether that drone takes off from the ground. And you have every right and responsibility that if it's not going to be safe, to not fly. And that may affect your business, but it is on you. That's a liability deal. So, that's your responsibility. And then also, you got to be careful about, in some areas, like specifically Alliance Airport, that require greater than 24 hours Lance authorization time. If you're within that 24-hour window, they just won't consider it. You have to be greater than that. So, doing your Lance authorizations or doing your waiver authorization requests through the FAA, more than 20, give yourself some lead time, because again, they've gotten better about returning those requests pretty quickly, especially with Lance. But you may get a no. They may ask for more information. You may not, circumstances may change. Give yourself as much lead time. Do your future self a solid and give yourself as much lead time as humanly possible. Recommended equipment that you want to have on site. Backup batteries. Batteries are consumable, and I'll talk more about that here in a minute. But, you really, I personally believe you can't have too many batteries. Right? That is the number one thing that will slow you down. And when you're running an operation, especially one that requires you to fly 2, 3, 4 times and run operations all day while you still have light, if you have a battery that has an issue, that can really scuttle and add a whole nother day, which is a lot of cost. Staying there another day may interrupt, getting back to, from the site back to your house, back to transmitting the data, what have you. It can create a big problem. So always having backup batteries, a battery and a half for every expected flight minute is something that I personally go through. And I rotate them as well. So make sure you're not just using the 2 batteries, even though you have 6 of them, but rotating them all continuously. So I'll talk about more about lithium polymer battery memory here in a minute. Toolkit, you always want to, if with your drone, I know that there are authorized repair people for DJI, Autel, what have you. But you really should be able to fix minor issues with your drones yourself, right? Familiarize yourself with your own technology. Because again, it's like a wrench. It's got some vibrating parts. It's got a lot of solid state parts. You need to make sure you understand how the firmware works. You need to understand the tool inside and out. And you're going to have consistent problems. It's a finicky technology at the end of the day. So you really need to understand what is going on inside the machine, physical and software wise. Pilot in command to visual observer communication. I like to have a little walkie-talkie with me. You don't want to be trying to yell across a field to your visual observer when they're saying tree, tree, and you're like, what? You want to have a good, consistent communication scheme that is not encumbering. You don't have to fiddle with it while you're trying to, do manual flying, but also is easy for you to communicate. Safety equipment for personnel. If you're in a construction site, hard hat, always have a reflective vest. I'll diatribe for a minute about how we are representatives of the drone industry. The drone industry is still way in its infancy. Yes, we're starting to get a little bit of progress, but there's still an enormous amount of suspicion about drone pilots, especially in a residential or urban environment where people think that you're spying on them. But the more legitimate you look, the more like you're supposed to be there, the less you look like you're hiding or trying to just be in plain clothes. And the more like, hey, look, I'm doing an operation, everyone stand back. People aren't going to bother you nearly as much. And it leaves a good impression that like, oh, there's legitimate drone flying going on and that's okay. And that's a message that we, as any professional pilot, we want to send out to the community. So, and also gloves. I like to wear gloves. You know, getting your hand nicked by the drone. First off, you should never approach the drone if the blades are spinning for any reason. But, you know, sometimes stuff happens. You want to make sure you have, I like to use welding gloves personally whenever I'm handling my drones. And those, they're thick, they're leather. The likelihood of me getting my finger chopped off is maybe not fully reduced to zero, but it's less likely depending upon if there's torque involved in the motor or not at that time and the size of the drone. Landing pad and spacing cones. I talked about landing pad earlier. Is you don't want your drone landing on dirt or gravel or just a dirty surface. It is, though it is an aircraft, it at the same time is a delicate piece of technology, a computer. It's got fans on it, similar to like your laptop or your tower computer. And you want to try to mitigate its contact with the ground as much as humanly possible, as well as spacing cones. And I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second, but you want to have spacing cones because you want to give yourself a safe operational area that you can keep bystanders away, that you can give yourself some grace as far as landing with the wind and variations on GPS and what have you. So that's something that's really important. First aid kit, lacerations happen, stuff happens, you can get shocked. All sorts of different things happen. It's an important thing to have. When you're out in the field, the last thing you want is any sort of bleeding or medical emergency and having no way to address it whatsoever. That's just not safe for many, many different types of occupations. And then as I mentioned earlier, the handheld wind gauge, I believe this. I just believe in it. I think that it's really important to have, you know, specifically because I've done a lot of flying in, you know, the prairies in Texas and things like that. And you'll think that it's like, oh, the wind's not so bad. And you get out there and you're pretty much being blown over. So I think that's one I'll harp on for sure. Pre-flight checklist. I'm going to go ahead and chat. Yeah, mechanic gloves do work really well. I'm going to put this link into chat for everybody. And it is just kind of like a mock-up pre-flight checklist. Feel free to edit it however you want. This is just something, you know, you at least have a baseline to go with of things that you should have, things that you should consider, things that you should want to have checked off prior to going to the site, prior to flying your aircraft. And it has most of these things in it, you know, longitude and latitude, your flight location, your registration information, things that if like the FAA were to come inspect you or, you know, just show up on your site, which I've even heard of people really having that done to them, but nonetheless, they would ask you for almost all of these things and you really want to have them. If somebody's suspicious or calls the police on you, these are things that you could talk to the police about and be like, hey, here's all my information. Here's how I'm legitimate. It's good. And additionally, this is a great piece of set of information that you want to have for your back end logging, because that's a crucial piece, because every bit of flight time that you have, some of what we were talking about earlier, the number of hours you have, how long the flight was in, whether you deal that with a Loft, Air Map, whatever app you're using, or you just do it via paper, that's your portfolio. Just like an artist or an architect or an engineer or anything like that, that's your proof of competency. So, you know, and additionally, if you come in with these, you know, piece of paper, something similar to this, saying like, this is all my information, this is how I stay safe, this is all my stuff, then hey, you're probably going to make that customer really confident that you're legit, you know what you're doing. So battery maintenance, that's something that I think is extremely critical. You know, some people use gas powered drones. They're here and there and they're a little bit used, but the vast majority of drone pilots and the vast majority of operations you do use a lithium polymer battery, right? Basic LiPo battery, anywhere from 2S, 3S to 6S, or even, you know, if you're running these high powered like X-class level racing drones, 10S, 12S, you know, because why not? Each cell of a lithium polymer battery goes between 4.2 volts and 3.8 volts. It is balanced. You're not dropping this battery all the way to zero, and you're not charging it up as high as it technically can go or chemically can go. So you really have that 4.2 to 3.8 volts to play with. Most off-the-shelf drones aren't going to give you that voltage information, but if you're using like a DIY drone or you're using what I call a naked battery, so it doesn't have a PCB or a printed copper board regulator on the battery, which DJI drones do, and Skydio drones and Autel drones do, right? And those regulate them. What you're going to end up seeing is just be like, I'm full or I'm not full. But what they're really saying is I'm between 4.2 volts at full and 3.8 volts at empty. And that's per cell. You know, you accumulate it together like a 4S battery, which has 4 cells, it'll be 16.4 and what have you. But the problem with the batteries that you have that are not regulated by PCBs is that you can just keep draining them down to 0 and that will trash them and they won't be very good. And you have to use special tricks with balancers to get them to pop up above, you know, those are 2.7 volts. You have to treat it like an iCAD battery or something. But also you can overcharge it above 4.2, which is extremely dangerous if you're not paying attention. And some racing pilots do this. They'll, you know, pop it up to like 4.5 volts per cell. But the problem with that is it becomes unstable and you risk it popping and exploding and lighting on fire and your drone's on fire and it looks like a meteor. So, you know, that's something to consider in understanding the chemistry behind the lithium batteries. Storage mode. Oh, and also if you use a PCB backed drone battery like you would have with a DJI battery, you got to consider the fact that that's a piece of electronics that's hardwired onto those cells that is regulating its voltage. And eventually, if you just put it up on the shelf, it will drain that battery all the way out and it'll be done, right? And they won't let you use. To bypass a DJI battery and try to jumpstart the cells back to a nominal voltage is, I've done it once, it's not worth it. It's just completely not worth it. And if once your batteries are trashed, that happens to them, take them to Home Depot. Home Depot will dispose of your batteries. Don't throw them in the trash. That's a hazard. I'm pretty sure illegal in a lot of places, but you can take them to Home Depot. They have a battery disposal section in most Home Depots. That's where I take my batteries, with that go bad or what have you. So that's a good place I recommend to dispose of them. Storage mode. So storage mode is actually, depending upon who you ask, between 3.75 volts per cell and 3.8 volts per cell. And what storage mode is, it's the nominal voltage where the technical chemistry of each cell is the most stable and it won't move. If you have a naked battery, such as, you know, it's just a bunch of, you know, cell cakes wrapped in foil with leads soldered to them, if you're at storage mode, you're good for quite some time. They won't really do much of anything. However, if you leave them charged, like at a 4.2 volts per cell, you can run the risk of them lighting on fire, right? That's unstable. You should never, ever, ever leave your drone batteries unless they're being regulated by a printed copper board regulator. You should never leave them charged in a storage capacity. That's completely unsafe and it is a fire hazard. So I also don't recommend really storing your batteries like in your house. Try to find, like, you know, put them in a shed or take them outside, because you never know. You never know if something goes bad, and they light up pretty impressively, and that can cause a house fire, that can cause you a facility fire, something like that. So you want to take the fact that these are hazardous batteries, period. They're no toy, they're not a joke, they can light on fire. Take that seriously. Cold performance. Now, I know we're just coming out of winter, but, you know, if you're flying out in Alaska or you're flying out anywhere where it's extremely cold, the batteries will perform markedly worse in cold areas. So if you're going to go out to a cold environment, or you've like had the battery sitting in your garage, warm them up, get them to at least like room temperature, right? Put them in your jacket pocket, or, you know, leave them in your car with the car running for a little good minute, right? Don't let them be ice cold, because you're going to notice an extensive drop in its ability to perform versus what you're expecting. Segues me into the last part about batteries. Battery memory. You are going to turn batteries over. And what I mean by that is batteries don't last forever. They have a memory to them. Eventually they wear out. One of the important things that you want to do with your batteries, every time you get one, I put a number on mine. Battery 1, battery 2, battery 3, battery 15. Doesn't matter. Whatever kind of nomenclature or system you want to put together, label them and track how many times and how much you have used them every time. Because you'll find that after, you know, depending upon the battery, the brand, the quality, just a bunch of variables, but after X number of cycles, full to empty and recharge, the performance will start to very much so lag and wane and not be so competent. So what that means is when you, let's say you're manually flying with a DJI drone, and you'll look up and say like, oh, I'm at 100% battery, and you do a lift up and you're carrying like a DSLR camera on your Matrice 600 or what have you, all of a sudden you just get this voltage drop, and it's like, oh, hey, I'm at 60% battery after 5 seconds, and you're like, whoa, what happened? Well, what that is you're using old batteries, and those batteries are trying to compensate for the amperage pull that you're pulling into the drone to make it fly, and that's causing the voltage to sag. At that point, that's your telltale sign that you want to think about getting rid of those batteries. But if you've taken the time to mark and track how many times you've cycled those batteries, and you're like, hey, it's about every 30 times I cycle this battery, I start to get a meaningful amount of voltage sag. Well, then as you approach 30 or so cycles, that it's probably time to think about getting rid of it or replacing it, right? So that's something that's important with your battery memory. It's a critical piece, because if you go out there with a bunch of old batteries and you're going to fly, and you have to fly for a particular amount of time, and your batteries are old and they're just not able to perform, well, then you might as well just not brought as not batteries. It's the same effect, right? You're going to have to bring them back, you have to recharge, and your performance that you're expecting, which if you're doing flights, let's say over water or something to that effect, and you're trying to push out a little further over a lake or down a river or what have you, that could cause a huge problem on being able to actually get your drone back to a safe place to land, or a place that doesn't get it destroyed. So pre-flight planning, positioning your VOs when you're actually on site. You want to make sure that your VOs, they're there to be your second pair of eyes, whether you're using first person view or whether you're focused on the camera angles or whatever. If your head is down and can't observe the drone, you need that visual observer has a very meaningful task, because you may not be able to have the depth perception, or the fact you have no real peripheral vision when you're flying a drone and looking through the camera for whatever capacity, that, oh man, there's a tree coming off to my right side, if you're doing kind of a strafe run, or if you're flying a FPV drone. So they're actually your second pair of eyes, and they need to have their ability to see if you go around the corner. It's okay to go around the corner and specifically lose a little bit of line of sight for you personally of your drone, but that's why you have the visual observer, because they are supplementing that, right? If you're doing inspections of a building, like a large building, like apartment building or what have you, that's going to be kind of common, especially if you're doing like a full 360 tour of the building. You may not lose connection, but you may lose, as the pilot, the visual line of sight for a moment. So walkie-talkie communication, as I talked about earlier, is extremely important, because again, if they're around the corner on the other side of the building and they're trying to tell you, okay, well, you're good, or you watch out for that light pole, or watch out for that electric pole, they can't be yelling from the other side of a building. That's just not practical.
Hey,
And then
Evan, we've got about an hour. An hour. We have about a minute on the hour.
Sure.
Can you kind of sum up? I know that you were going to kind of talk a little bit about, having a business and the responsibilities of it. Do you want to touch a little bit on that?
Yeah. So real quick, really what you want to do,
I guess, is what you're trying to say, right?
What you really want to do is, if you're starting a business, think about the fact that you've got to have a tiered level of responsibility. Having an operational manager that's going to be facilitating and soliciting work is important, but by and large, you don't necessarily need that person to always be in the field, right? They're doing the pre-work, the more advanced pre-work of making sure that this is even a possible mission to do, how much it's going to pay, what the deliverables are, what the new deliverables need to look like, because what your pilot is out there trying to make sure he facilitates collecting of the data, right, and making sure that he gets the correct things, but that needs to be transcribed to him. And what he's going to be doing is doing a lot of the pre-flight checklists. He's going to be doing the pre-flight analysis, the short-term pre-flight analysis, and he's also going to be doing the actual operation. So he's going to spend a lot of time out in the field. If you separate those two sets of responsibilities up, then you're really going to have a lot of opportunity to make sure that you have enough work for your pilot. It's a lot to do the soliciting of the work, the flying of the work, the editing of the work, all at one time. That's a large task. Triaging it down to that is important. And moreover, as we was talked about earlier, like you want to be able to have a system where you can integrate people in through Visual Observer, right? So having a basic set structure of this is what a visual observer needs to do. This is what you're supposed to do. You're going to be working with this pilot today. So go to this location and meet the pilot here. You get a certain amount of experience and you can stair step them into responsibilities such as, you know, cooperative piloting or actually piloting a mission. Maybe you have a mentorship program, but you want to stair step them into it, you know, because a pilot too, eventually will get to an operations management position. You also want to have a data analyst, right? So they're streaming data to this person that's making sure that the data that you're collecting is good, right? And it's similar to like a quality assurance type person, because some jobs that you're going to do, that there's could be tens, 20s, hundreds of gigs of data that you're going to have to compile through. And you got to make sure as you're going up and you're coming back down, you're streaming that data to lower the risk of, like, if your drone does crash, you don't lose 2-3 days of flight data or something to that effect. So that's really it. There was a lot of discussion earlier today about, you know, a lot of the business aspects of it that I think kind of covered most of my points, but that's really what I wanted to meaningfully add about it, is a triaged way of going from, I don't know anything, that I can observe a pilot and get direct instruction on what they need for each individual flight, and then taking them to being a pilot, and then taking them to be, hey, I'm managing multiple pilots that are operating out in the field simultaneously and holding them accountable to their flight times, doing their
Right.
paperwork, doing their maintenance.
Right, maximize, you know, what you have and being deliberate on what each position requires, the requirements for it, so that it is like a squeaky wheel. I mean, you know, that it, you know, you oil it and it goes smoothly. I mean, you always anticipate some issues, but by having preparation, and again, like everyone was speaking today, I mean, safety is the most important. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Evan. Keep in mind, again, we've recorded this so you can go back and look at the information. We do have a survey now into our chat, and you will be emailed the survey. Really important that we get some feedback so we know we're on point with the information we're giving you. Another thing I wanted to tell you is next month, I'm so excited because it's going to be specifically on Women in Drone did a survey of the industry in diversity and inclusion. And we're getting the results, and Sharon and her team are going to be going over the results. So I think that that's really going to be a fantastic workshop. I do want to thank our sponsors today. One of the things in the chat, Adrian Doko had mentioned there's a hands-on workshop in March 19th and 20th here you can sign up for and go out there, because again, the more opportunities that you have to work hands-on and work with the experts. I know John McBride from Morelli are going to be there, so there's going to be some experts out there that can help you with it. That's really important, especially if you're going into business like that, getting the experts to help you, the resources, amazing. So AUVSI is one of our sponsors, Drone Plus, Fox Fury, Lens Pen, Women in Drones, Half, Chariot Drones. So we've got a lot of sponsors. And again, it'll be on 18 in April. We hope you join us. We appreciate your time. I kind of wanted to end it because we do respect the time that you've taken from 10 to 12 today. So thank you so much again. I wanted to sign off. Great speakers today. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Mike, Sharon, and Evan. Have a great day. Thank you. And we're off.